All right, so we're back. I'm working on the Echoplex expansion unit, which incorporates that parallel JFET circuit and a rehousing. Obviously, where we last left off, and let me shut off this light here for a little less shadows, or more shadows. Where we last left off was testing that the unit was still functioning and would work well inside of the case. We jumped into the circuit at various points and then hooked it up to our input and output jacks. The reason for doing that is I always believe when you're doing something for the first time, it's good to go a little bit at a time and at each stage test what you're doing, so that way at the end you'll have a working unit and you won't have to figure out, well, at what point did things go wrong. The next time you do it, you could just go ahead and build it flat out, and there won't be you won't have as many problems about whether it's a conceptual problem or versus a wiring issue. But still, it's a good idea to always go a little bit at a time when you're building things and test as you go along, and that way it doesn't lead to huge amounts of problem solving. You're usually left with very little question about what went wrong. All right, so where we're at today is testing out the JFET boost circuit, which is based around the NTE452 JFET. We were building it on this little tag strip here, and I did that off camera real quick. It's a very, very simple circuit. I mean, a JFET sort of boost, a clean boost without tone controls or any other sort of accoutrements surrounding the JFET are very simple. I mean, you basically have, although there's 4 pinouts on this, so to speak, one is a case ground. There are 3 parts to the JFET, the drain, the source, and the gate. You can sort of translate that into tubes. If you're familiar to tubes in kind of a way, your gate is sort of your input or your grid, like on a tube. Your drain is like the plate, and is in a sense, it's where your power would come in and where you will couple with a capacitor to get your modulated signal out. And the source is sort of like the cathode, where you're going to establish the bias of the stage. So basically, just like in a tube stage, you would have your plate resistor, right? That would be your power supply off your B plus feeding the plate of the tube. You have your drain right here, which is being fed from the B plus. We've selected a resistor to get appropriate voltage drop to our NTE per spec of the data sheets. We've selected a corresponding source resistor and cathode. We've got a cathode resistor, or rather capacitor right here, an electrolytic, a little 4.7 microfarad, and then we have a little 2K2 resistor here for our source network. Our input or our gate, we're going to have to split in 2 directions, right? Because this is a parallel system. So one of the input will be split in one direction towards the boost unit, the other direction towards the the echo unit, and they'll be recombined at the output. But for right now, we're just going to test this unit alone and not worry about the echo unit. When it comes time to that, we're going to put this little trim potentiometer and use that as a balance pot to basically determine the correct division for entry into the echo versus the JFET. So for right now, we just want to test that the JFET is working properly. So this is our power supply. Over here would be our input from the jack. We need a little resistor there. We're probably going to just use like a 100K resistor or something like that to start off with. This is our ground wire, and this would be our capacitor going to our potentiometer and then to our output jack. So relatively simple. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wire, just kind of tack it all in, solder it all in, and then we're going to test it. So I'll be back in a minute. I'm just going to wire this thing up real quick. A couple of minutes of wiring. We put in, connected it to the power supply, our ground, our input resistor, the output capacitor connected to the potentiometer connected to the out jack, and as I said, we removed the echo input and output. We left the power supply in there, but input and output are now moved away, so we're just dealing with the boost circuit for purposes of testing and making sure it's doing what we want to do. All right, so I think right now the next step is obviously to test this thing and see if it's performing, if it's working at all. So I'm going to run and grab the Supro and plug it in and warm it up for a second, and we'll be right back right after that. So I'm going to grab that Supro. All right, so we got the Supro out, warmed up. Right now I've got the red wires, obviously the Supro as usual, and I'm just going to test for our base level to see what kind of gain level we've got. Just use that as memory, since we don't have an on and off switch for the boost circuit. I don't think that's really necessary. You'll see why, I think, as we go further on. But let's just get a baseline level to see how much boost we're getting out of this unit and if it works. Alright, so that's the Supro. So let's go ahead and plug in this unit. So I get a guitar cable, regular old guitar cable. We're going to plug into the unit's input, the Supro into the unit's output, and turn this down, and then we're going to plug in the power supply, the 18-volt power supply, into the 18-volt jack. And let's see what we got. Okay, raise up the volume. Alright, I think we got ourselves a working unit here. Alright, so I think we're good to go here. The next step is going to be basically to, let me cut this thing off and unplug it here. But the next thing is going to be to install this little trim pot that we're going to wire up as a divider off the input jack for the unit. One way going towards the JFET, the other way going towards the input of the Echo. And then we'll probably just use a 50-50 divide right here. Just use like two, 10K resistors there to recombine the JFET boosted signal along with the unaffected effect signal, delayed signal. All right, so let me get on that, and we'll be right back to test that. Okay, so we've completed the wiring, and obviously this is a mess in there right now. We'll be cleaning all that up once we're sure of our values of what we want, and we'll shorten up our leads. We'll use some heat shrink to cover up any exposed connections. We'll shorten, what needs to be shortened, and on and on and on, make it look nice. That's part of the craft, right? We want our stuff to look nice as well as perform nice. But anyway, so we've got our divider in there. We've got it set for 50%. We've got our two resistors here. One takes the output from the Echo, and the other one takes the output from the JFET boost. Everything seems, I guess, ready to go. So the next step would be to test it with the Supro again. So the Supro is still plugged in. So I'll just put the unit down here, and we'll go ahead and start attaching the cables. So we've got this would be our Supro. Then we're going to need to plug in our guitar. Got our guitar cable plugged in. Now the next thing would be the power supplies. Now we've got a 9-volt right here for operating the delay section, the Echo section of it. So that's in. And then we've got our 18-volt for operating the boost section. I guess, a simpler way would be just to run it on 18 and use, a regulator to bring it down to 9 and power both off the same. But there's limited space in here. And the voltage regulator, it just seemed, a regulator, a capacitor, resistor, the mounting versus an extra jack, I'll go that way. And it, it allows me for some other flexibility as well. So let's go ahead and we'll turn that off. We'll turn down our FET boost, and let's see if this thing's working. Grab the guitar, get a bass line. Okay, get the echo on. Already this seems to be helping. The secondary slap is not as aggressive. I can actually turn it up a little bit. Now let's gag it up, see what happens. Oh yeah, this is what we're looking for. Now you can see I've got this thing at 9 o'clock right now, and you can barely make out the other slap, and we've got a serious amount of boost going on at the same time. So I'm going to be able to bring this up to noon, and it's just about right. I think we've pretty much got what we want. I don't see much need for adjusting much, but let's just see what happens. We'll turn it over. We've got our trim pot in there. Let's see if we feed to one side what happens. Let's go over this way. Let's bring it over this way. So this way is obviously more boost, less of the slap. Kind of like it in the middle. So we can just use basically an even voltage divider in both places, and I think we've got what we're looking for. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and clean this up and replace the trim pot with some resistors, and we should be able to button it up and put it in play. So I'll see you in a couple seconds. All right, so we've done what we like to call tightening it down, buttoning it up, gone through all of everything and made it all look nice and clean. Got a resistive divider, power supply, a transistor, output coupling capacitor, potentiometer, 2 mixing resistors. I think all in all we've got a nice clean unit. It's basically ready to go. I'm going to just basically be putting the cover on this thing and putting it into play on the board. The only other modification I might make to this thing is I'm going to test it out. I don't have one here right now. I've got to just quickly order one. It's a small audio transformer. A little one-to-one kind of jammy, so that I can flip the phase on the FET output. So I think we're dealing with something that's a little bit that may be out of phase right here. Just off the top of my head, I'm pretty sure that most pedals have their inputs and outputs in phase with one another, but being that this is a single stage FET unit, you know, we're probably got a phasing issue. So I'm going to get a little transformer to couple with the FET circuit and then flip the phase around and see how that helps. But for now, I think we're done. We basically got what we're looking for, but to, you know, make it complete, maybe that, you know, little phasing issue can be taken care of, and then we'll have it 100% ready to go. So there it is, the final product. So I hope you found some of this stuff interesting, and inspires you to, you know, do some creative butchery of your own. So anyway, thanks for watching, and we're going to be in upcoming videos over the next couple of days, we're going to be putting this back on that that pedal board with the small box 3 on it. I just got in a little mixer that I'm going to use to mix the 3 signals that we had before, the dry signal, reverberated signal, and delayed signal, for a really cool kind of stereo mix for that first album sound. So check that out real soon. And once again, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.